Chernow's interpretive lens on George Washington. Ron Chernow's Washington. A Life is widely acclaimed for its fresh, psychologically rich, and deeply researched portrait of America's first president. Chernow's interpretive lens is distinguished by his focus on Washington's inner life, his willingness to confront flaws and contradictions, and his use of newly available sources and perspectives. Below is a comprehensive analysis of these aspects. 1. Analysis of Washington's character, ambition, restraint, and stoicism. Ambition. Chernow dispels the myth of Washington as a purely selfless public servant, instead presenting him as a man of considerable ambition, especially in his youth. Washington Ichi's early military career during the French and Indian War is depicted as motivated by a desire for social advancement and recognition. Chernow notes that Washington really wanted a commission in the British Army and aspired to join the ranks of the British elite. Had he achieved this, Chernow speculates, Washington might have ended up suppressing the American Revolution rather than leading it. Washington's social climbing is further illustrated by his efforts to become a gentleman and his longing to visit England, as well as his strategic marriage to Martha Custis, which solidified his place among the Virginia gentry. After the Revolutionary War, Washington's meticulous gathering and cataloging of his correspondence is interpreted by Chernow as evidence of his growing interest in his legacy and how history would remember him. Restraint. Chernow's Washington is a man who learns, often painfully, the value of restraint, both in his personal conduct and in wielding power. As president, Washington was acutely aware that every action set a precedent, requiring constant self-restraint, especially given the lack of clear guidelines for the new office. Despite his popularity and the fears of some that he might become a monarch, Washington repeatedly resisted opportunities to seize more power than was constitutionally granted, a principled refusal that Chernow emphasizes as crucial in shaping the presidency and the republic. On a personal level, Chernow highlights Washington's restraint in his relationship with his mother, Mary Ball Washington. Despite her lack of affection and public complaints about him, Washington remained dutiful and never publicly criticized her, even when it caused him embarrassment. Stoicism. Chernow both affirms and complicates the traditional image of Washington as a stoic. While Washington's reputation for being an undemonstrative, granite-faced stoic is described as slightly exaggerated, but not completely undeserved, Chernow reveals that beneath the stoic exterior was a man of intense feeling hidden behind a carefully maintained facade. Washington's lack of formal education contributed to his emotional reserve, as he felt inferior to his more classically educated peers and thus adopted a reserved demeanor. Chernow's biography is praised for showing Washington's vulnerabilities, his insecurities about education, his financial anxieties, and his struggles with the burdens of leadership. These humanizing details make his stoicism appear as a conscious choice rather than an innate trait. Washington's flaws and contradictions. Slavery. Chernow devotes significant attention to Washington's evolving, often contradictory stance on slavery. He presents Washington as a man who, while deeply enmeshed in the slave-holding society of Virginia and personally benefiting from enslaved labor, grew increasingly uncomfortable with the institution as he aged. Chernow does not shy away from the fact that Washington's wealth, status, and lifestyle were built on the backs of enslaved people, and that he was a strict taskmaster. Washington's efforts to treat his slaves fairly and humanely by the standards of his time, refusing to break up families, rewarding loyalty, and providing for their health, are acknowledged. But Chernow is clear that these actions do not absolve him of complicity in the system. Washington's attempts to phase out slavery legislatively were half-hearted and ultimately abandoned when he realized it would threaten the fragile union of the new nation. Chernow gives weight to Washington's decision to free the slaves he personally owned in his will, a rare act among Virginia planters, but also notes the limitations. He could not free the Breer dower slaves belonging to Martha Breer's estate. This act is presented as both a moral gesture and a reflection of Washington's inability to fully confront the institution during his lifetime. Chernow's treatment of slavery is neither apologetic nor anachronistically condemnatory. He presents Washington's evolution as genuine but incomplete, and frames his ambivalence as a central flaw, one that mirrored the nation's own founding contradictions. Personal ambition. Chernow traces Washington's ambition to his youth emphasizing his sense of social inferiority and his relentless drive to rise in colonial society. Washington's family was not wealthy or well-connected, and Chernow shows how this fueled his desire for status, land, and recognition. His marriage to Martha Custis is depicted as both a love match and a strategic alliance. Chernow is careful to show that Washington's ambition was balanced by an equally powerful sense of restraint and duty. Washington was acutely aware of his public image and the precedents he set, often sublimating personal ambition for the greater good, most notably in his voluntary relinquishment of power after the Revolution, and again after 2 presidential terms. Chernow does not idealize Washington's ambition. He notes that Washington could be calculating, image-conscious, and at times obsessed with his reputation. Yet, Washington's self-awareness of his own flaws, his lack of formal education, his temper, his social anxieties, became, in Chernow's telling, a source of strength, driving him to self-improvement and careful leadership. 3. Chernow's use of new sources and perspectives. Exploiting the expanded Washington papers. Chernow's biography is notable for being one of the first major single-volume works to fully exploit the expanded and digitized Washington papers, made available by the University of Virginia's Washington Papers Project. This project included both Washington's own writings and letters sent to him, providing a much more complete picture of his relationships, reputation, and the context in which he operated. The digital edition allowed Chernow to search and cross-reference Washington's writings and correspondence in ways that were not possible for earlier biographers, enabling him to uncover nuances, contradictions, and patterns in Washington's thinking and behavior. Integration of letters written to Washington. A significant innovation was the inclusion of letters written to Washington, not just those written by him. This allowed Chernow to draw on the perspectives of Washington's contemporaries, offering a more nuanced and complete portrait than earlier biographers who focused primarily on Washington's own words, recent scholarship, and secondary sources. Chernow also benefited from the explosion of specialized monographs and studies on every aspect of Washington's life: his political philosophy, private life, views on slavery, and more. These works, often based on newly available archival material, informed Chernow's synthesis and interpretation. No discovery of unpublished documents, but comprehensive synthesis. There is no evidence that Chernow discovered entirely unpublished or unknown Washington documents. Rather, his innovation was in the comprehensiveness and depth with which he mined the now available corpus of Washington's papers, especially as digitized and expanded by the University of Virginia Project. 4. Chernow's interpretive approach in context. Chernow's interpretive lens is psychological and empathetic, focusing on the evolution of Washington's character over time. He seeks to humanize Washington, exploring both his virtues and his flaws, and to situate him within the broader currents of his time. Chernow's narrative style is engaging and accessible, appealing to both general readers and scholars, and is recognized for its ability to make Washington live as a complex, conflicted, and ultimately human figure. Compared to earlier biographers, Chernow's work stands out for its psychological depth, narrative flair, and willingness to confront the contradictions of Washington's life. He builds on the work of earlier scholars, but surpasses them in making Washington accessible and relatable to modern readers, while still maintaining scholarly rigor. Conclusion. Ron Chernow's WashingtonALife is distinguished by its psychological realism, narrative energy, and balanced assessment of Washington's virtues and flaws. Chernow's interpretive lens foregrounds Washington's ambition, restraint, and stoicism, while also confronting his flaws and contradictions, especially regarding slavery and personal ambition. By fully exploiting new sources and perspectives, Chernow offers a nuanced, humanized, and comprehensive portrait of America's first president, setting a new standard for single-volume biographies of Washington.